leadership, they really began to see that their employees bought into that kind of co-creation, because that's really what it's about. Yeah. So a leader, you're not there to do it on your own. And that's where earlier on I talked about the connection. It's about that co-creation. What are we creating together? Working with them, it brought about that sense of ownership. You see, when your employees have that sense of ownership, it's a win-win. It's a win-win. You don't have to work too hard because they're in that co-creation process with you.
Welcome to Sustainability Transformations podcast, where we discuss bold ideas to drive positive change for people, community, and business. And today I'm so pleased we have Joy Ogie Hartfield, who is a purpose-driven leader, visionary transformation coach, TEDx speaker, CEO of JT International Leadership Academy. Joy is more than a coach, he's a catalyst for lasting change. Leadership philosophy is grounded in a simple but powerful truth. Featured expert on BBC, TV, and radio, and respected voice in leadership, mindset, mastery, diversity, and human potential. His women empowerment events have created huge transformation around the world, helping thousands reclaim their voice. I'm so excited for this one because Joy has been a coach, leadership coach for me in the past, so I have a personal experience. Welcome once again, Joy. Can you introduce yourself and what gets you excited about human
Well, thank
transformation?
you so much. I mean, that introduction was enough, I think. But wow, I am super, super excited to be here, Dr. Enock. What a great podcast. I've listened to a few. It's absolutely incredible. The information, the guests that you have had have been absolutely phenomenal. So it's a real pleasure and a privilege, to be here. And so thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast.
What gets you excited about the personal transformation and mindset, Joy?
Well, it doesn't take a lot to excite me, but that's the truth. Yeah, but I get very excited about personal development because that is one thing that you can have control of. We cannot control how other people behave. We cannot control how other people, choose to lead, but we can control how we see ourselves and how we see the world. So personal development is absolutely key because it's about cultivating the right mindset. Success has a mindset. Failure, success, they are in the mind. So when we cultivate that right mindset for success, it allows us then to be able to lead with vision, to lead with integrity, and to lead with purpose.
A lot of leaders are trained to have purpose, but there's been a huge challenge with employees, how they experience businesses and their goals. So what are the most common disconnects between leadership intentions or intent and employee experience, would you say?
That's an incredible question. And one of the biggest disconnects is when leaders speak about values like inclusion and well-being and empowerment, and these have become great buzzwords. But then their behavior and the systems that they create around them or their decision making doesn't quite reflect those values. So with that, employees can really fill the gap immediately. And that's where the disconnect takes place. Really, without leaders aligning their actions, aligning their intent with actions, you begin to breed mistrust because then the employees are wondering and thinking, well, actually, you're saying something, but then your actions are demonstrating something else. So, for me, leadership then must move from performance to transformative. So it's not about the badge of a leader. I'm a leader. This is what I do. But the question more so is, am I involved in that transformative process with those who I have been called to serve, which of course are the employees. So that means in that sense, having to engage employees takes that skill of listening and acting consistently. Your actions and your words are in alignment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Within sustainability, again, the podcast is sustainability transformations, but I always look at how sustainability can learn from other industry. And it turns out a lot of IT transformations and other transformations, majority of the failure has to do with the culture and the people aspect. Why do you think that aspect of managing people within leadership and teams is overlooked, or they are not paid specific attention to within the same leadership misalignment and engagement?
Well, managing people is tough because really getting to know yourself takes years. Never mind being put in a situation where you have to manage others and really get to know them and to kind of understand their needs. So we understand that in itself comes with its own challenges. But in this era, and especially, with COVID and everything that had happened, things have changed. Expectations are different. So it can never be business as usual. We cannot lead as usual. So for leaders, it's important now that we need to understand what that leadership style looks like in moving forward. Every leader needs to define their leadership style because that's the first point of contact. So people get to understand what you are about, who you are as a leader. So for me, that question, empathy, it's about trust, it's about authenticity. We've moved from that era of here's my badge, I'm a leader. What does that mean? Am I leading with empathy? Am I compassionate? So empathy is where a leader pauses to ask, how are you? Really, not just, because I just want to say it for saying sake and move on. But having that, that space, or giving their employees that space to really pause and to understand about their own well-being and how they can support and contribute positively. So it's about listening, it's about empathy, it's about trust, and it's about authenticity.
In leadership, alignment is very important. And so moving towards the right direction of the goal, because if you are achieving a goal, but you're going towards the wrong direction, that could be a challenge. So can you share a real coaching example where leadership misalignment hurt engagement?
So I worked with a global firm that had a strong, where they declared to have a strong commitment to sustainability. Internally, the leaders were pushing unrealistic KPIs because we like to do that because it's one of those, these are the things that I'm doing. And sometimes, it ticks the boxes. But really what was happening was these KPIs were leading to burnout, high turnovers, and the teams were not really feeling empowered. And of course, in terms of the challenge that they were using, there wasn't that consultation. Those KPIs were there, and it was expected to be met. And so in coaching, we were able to uncover most of the leaders were operating out of fear, fear of being seen as, soft or underperforming. And so this is where the mindset, so if I'm there caring, for my staff, or I'm asking them, or I'm spending time in conversation, then I will not be respected because, they won't take me seriously. But once we were able to shift that mindset in terms of how they thought, we were able to help them align their actions within the organization's stated purpose, which was the importance of being able to engage their employees. And once the employees felt listened to and felt heard, interestingly enough, the initiative that they were trying to push began to take shape, because it wasn't about really pushing those KPI, but it was about bringing them into alignment with a clear understanding of what it would take to get them engaged in those initiatives and enable them to perform and get outstanding results.
That's great. That's a good practical example. So you mentioned about empathy, so authentic leadership. And if I use the ChatGPT example, where now with my own experience and common conversations, people can tell when an email or a message which has come through looks a bit robotic and it's not authentic. Again, I'm using that as a context about how important authenticity is. And so it's got me to think around, how do empathy and trust and authenticity actually show up in leadership practice, considering I've just shared that people can sense those or feel that authenticity. So, how do you think those empathy, trust can actually show up in the leadership practice?
That's again an amazing. I love those questions. I love that
That's good.
question, and it has a simple response. Just speak from the heart. Speak from the heart. Authenticity is something that has become well known in terms of, we talk about authentic leadership, and people are really embracing authenticity because people are realizing that we don't want to deal with people who are fake. We don't want to deal with people who are not present. So when leaders are present with their people, that is the basis of leading authentically, because it's not about being liked or being popular. It's also about speaking your truth. And people have come to value that. So authentic leadership, in a way, can start small. It can start by having those daily moments where you can connect. It's not about control, but it's about connecting one person at a time. And those connections become really, really important. For many people, actually, and especially, after the pandemic, people, when you speak to the ordinary person, they're not really keen on having a huge pay rise. Yes, they would like a pay rise, but they want they want a leader who's able to understand them, who's able to connect them, a leader who sees them, a leader who hears them, a leader who's able to be supportive and help them transition to that next level in terms of their own vision and their own aspiration. That's what really, really matters. So that, of course, brings us into that purpose-driven leadership, because when leaders understand that sense of having that purpose and why, then they're able to drive those change and embrace the authenticity that lies within.
Recent research have confirmed those areas of values mean a lot to employees, leaders. Maya Angelou that mentioned people will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
That's right. And just to add also, it's about choosing connection over control.
Right.
Because we can't be deceptive, because we think as leaders we have to control everything. But really, real authenticity is about choosing, and there's a choice here.
Right.
Because we can choose to truly connect with those that we work with over actually
What is a simple shift a leader can make today to lead more authentically?
be present. So stop replacing performance. Um, because we want to perform, we want to be seen. And so we have these masks that we wear, or some leaders wear. But it's that taking away that mask and simply being present. So next time a leader has a meeting, if you're listening, next time you have a meeting, well, sometimes I wouldn't even advise you have any of those PowerPoints or slide desk. Put them to one side. Stand before those who are your employees, or who you've been. I use the word call to serve, and speak to them from your heart. And it can be scary because you're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say? But that is where that real connection is. Because when you are not hiding behind those slides and those PowerPoints and those fancy words, people can actually come to respect the real you, because for once you are not hiding behind those things. You have the opportunity to truly engage, be present, and to listen.
Yeah, it ties back to that connection as you mentioned, because if you've got a PowerPoint, your attention is focused on those tools. But if you've pulled them aside on occasion, then that allows that connection to be improved. So that's great. So
Or even have meetings. Sorry,
that's
Ogeh,
all
I
right.
was just
Yeah, that's
continuing.
good. Good. Please.
But like one of the leaders that I was coaching, and he was leading a multinational organization, and he really had a fear. And I think one of his fears was the fear of criticism. If I don't really prepare, or would my staff respect me? Would they like what they see? So. But once we began to understand that actually it was okay, he started to have meetings. Monday meetings. He would have actually, it would have been death by a PowerPoint, but he started just coming into the meetings. People were relaxed. He was spending at least half an hour going around and asking people how they were. Tell us about your weekend. How do you feel? What could we do to make your experience working with us better? And people were like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it really brought a whole different dynamic to his
Oh,
leadership.
that's good. People are not looking for perfect human beings to be leaders. No, well, everybody knows that they are not perfect, individually. So why would they expect so much? But I know perhaps it can be over time, the expectation that when you're at the top, then you have to get 100% every day, 365 days a year, right? Exploring the next around. So purpose is such a big buzzword which has been thrown around perhaps, but how can leaders live actually through these daily actions that reflect their purpose? So it can be a manufacturing company that their purpose is to produce the best soap or product for customers, and they are so passionate about that production that they are providing. Or it can be a healthcare company where they are so passionate about delivering healthcare for people. How can leaders learn through this purpose, would you say?
Another brilliant question. I mean, this is an area that I absolutely enjoy. One of my books is on purpose, although from a personal development angle.
Right.
And the thing with purpose, the thing with purpose is we want to be purpose driven. We use the word almost kind of really casual. Your organization, we want purpose driven, and I use that as well, in my literature. But the question is, how do you become purpose driven, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your organization, without first understanding that purpose for your own self? Do you have a purpose? You can't be purpose driven if you don't have a purpose, your own self. It's when your purpose aligns with your organizational purpose that you're able to be purpose driven, because that comes with its own set of values. And that is that alignment. And that's why you find sometimes, leaders become really disengaged and dissatisfied because they are in organizations that does not reflect their values. They're struggling. So how do you drive change or sustainable change where actually you are in a place you don't really believe in, or you don't really believe that actually what they're doing or what they're saying, has a purposeful impact? So purpose, in a sense, let's just dive into that. Purpose is what gives your life a meaning. That's from the personal perspective. We can use that and say purpose is what gives meaning to any organization. So when we talk about how can leaders live, actually live through their daily actions, is being able to understand what is it that gives them that meaning and then align it with their true values and their true actions.
Body of work that has connected purpose with resilience as well. But I know that's not what we're talking about. But I just thought I would share how important having that purpose gets you through the challenges. So, when I say the resilience, you have your own purpose. And if you're able to align it with the business or the organization's purpose, then through the ups and downs,
That's right.
you have a goal. And so that helps to go. So thanks for sharing that. So have you seen companies, organizations succeed by linking their purpose to employee engagement or sustainability or other business outcomes? Would you share?
Well, yes, yes. I once coached a company in the energy sector that moved from that whole compliance-driven sustainability to purpose-driven leadership, because we can comply and then we sit and tick the box. Because whether people are engaging or not, you will never know, and people are sat there and disengaged, because really the emphasis has always been that whole kind of compliance. As long as people were in compliance, then they felt that things were moving. But when they actually move from that strategy to a more purpose-driven sustainability, purpose-driven leadership, they really began to see that their employees bought into that kind of co-creation, because that's really what it's about. Yeah. So a leader, you're not there to do it on your own. And that's where earlier on I talked about the connection. It's about that co-creation. What are we creating together? That's what brings about those sustainable goals. It gives, well, in my case, working with them, it brought about that sense of ownership. You see, when your employees have that sense of ownership, it's a win-win. It's a win-win. You don't have to work too hard because they're in that co-creation process with you. And in turn, organization recognizing their efforts as well. So their engagement was skyrocketed.
Yeah.
They could actually see the difference that their people were contributing to something that was bigger than themselves. And that's what purpose does.
Yeah.
Purpose is bigger than us. That's the bigger picture. So it's not about us, or it's not about you as a leader. It's something that is bigger than you.
Yeah.
And that's why we need others in that purpose-driven leadership approach.
Yeah. The challenge is compliance may come from a government, but there is always a reason why a government will bring in compliance. And so we have a lot of companies that may be caught up in that, oh, we are doing it because we have to comply, but there is a purpose behind it. And this is where the leader have to be able to communicate that. If you move that government company compliance, you have employees where they may be doing things, but they don't even know why they're doing it. They don't know the purpose why they're doing it.
That's right.
Uh,
That's right. That's the
yeah,
why. I mean, that's you've nailed it there. You've absolutely nailed it. It's almost like when you say to a child, do
yeah.
this. What do they say?
Why?
Why?
Yeah,
And then as adults, we get very upset. What do you mean? Just do it. Just get on with it. And they're probably thinking, well, no, I know I'm going to do it,
yeah.
but you tell me what the why is. And you're absolutely spot on. And as leads, and some leaders fail to do that. But actually, when you take time and helping people to understand the why and bringing that purpose into it, comes back into the patience and bringing about that connection. People will go that extra mile for you or for any organization once you're able to help them connect with why they do what they do. It makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, well,
Exploring the next segment around feedback. So, in my own career experience, I think it was probably about 8 years ago or maybe 7 years ago, where I had the opportunity to be exposed to we call it 360 feedback, where I received feedback from my peers, I received feedback from my line managers, and then I received feedback from extended customers that I don't work through day to day. And I've still got a copy of that 360 feedback. And fortunately, I've been able to work on the areas of improvement, acknowledging. And so I share my story to show how important feedback is. But quite frankly, I am saying it nicely now. At the very start, I remember when I received that 360 feedback within the first 2 weeks, I just couldn't open it. So having shared my own struggle, why is feedback such a struggle in companies?
it's one of those things, isn't it, really? Because most leaders, I mean, we're bringing it because we're talking about leadership, but most people in general were never taught. They were never taught how to give feedback. I mean, when was the last time you went to UD, you did your PhD? Who sat you down? I mean, I do leadership courses and programs, so I bring this as one of the core subject matter because I know it is very, very hard to understand what that feedback, but nobody really sat you down and go, this is how you give feedback. You found yourself in those situations and then you quickly learned, then has often been tied to criticism. And that's why most people struggle and most organizations struggle. And interesting enough, there is the right way to give feedback. But it's back again to that, having that mindset shift that feedback isn't about criticism. Feedback is about growth. You see, when we understand that, then it makes it so much easier. Imagine if you invited somebody to your office or, a leader was going to give, an appraisal and they started right and say, okay, these are the things you've done wrong. They actually started with the things they've done right, with praise. You see, it's not feedback or a thank you. Thank you so much, Enoch, for the things you've done in the past 12 months. I really appreciate it. However, there are certain areas that I know that perhaps you need help, perhaps you need support. Could we look at it together? Did that sound like right feedback? It is feedback, but there is an empowering tone. There's an empowering language that has been attached to that allows people to feel I'm not a failure. I'm not all bad. It's something good inside of
Yeah,
me. So that's always the challenge. So there's a right way that readers need to kind of reframe feedback and see feedback as a gift. It is a gift, but it's also about companies, organization creating the right environment for that feedback to really take root and be seen as growth. Because if you think about the 360, and of course people have to rank you, and then some people have gotten really upset and not spoken to their
yeah,
colleagues because if they find out you said that about me, how could you have
yeah,
said that about me? People get really, really upset. So people then are afraid to actually be honest So it's an interesting one. So it's being able to understand that actually it's a gift. It's about care, it's about clarity, and feedback also can be an act of respect. And it's not necessarily about that rejection or feeling rejected. But having said that, there's much work to be done in this area.
Yeah, no, that's in my instance, it was anonymous, but it's so interesting where even though it was anonymous, you still have the mindset.
And yes, I mean, I know this time, but I had a coachee, in senior leadership who had his 360, and it left a scar. Yeah, he felt it was very unfair the way that he'd been rated, and he never recovered. Never, no, he never recovered because there were some really hurtful things, and perhaps the way it was communicated, that for months he suffered a real lack of self-confidence and self-esteem. So, yes, we're there's a funny side to that as well. But the reality is that it is something that organization ought to take seriously. Leaders need to learn how to give proper feedback that is empowering, but not destroy the person that is receiving that feedback.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's so important. So, what coaching tools do you recommend to help leaders give feedback that's engaging and not exhausting, like what we've just talked about, where it can be damaging? But
There's all sorts of coaching and that I could recommend. I mean, you got the SBI model, which is the situation, behavior, impact. That's often a really great starting point. And it kind of keeps that feedback objective. It keeps it constructive. But also, it is asking before you give that feedback. It's always a good idea to say, are you open to some feedback? Ask, because then you are laying the foundation. People might be anxious and you can settle them before you actually give that feedback. Or you could say, are you open to some feedback that may make you grow? Can you see? That's it's a different approach to, are you open to some feedback? And then they have all these preconceived idea of what you're going to say. But when you bring that growth element, we're going back to that, the why. Remember, when people know why they are receiving that feedback, or why the feedback could be negative, then you are equipping them to understand and what needs to happen for them to go on to that next level. So feedback with the sense of growth and helping them makes it far more worthwhile and enjoyable process. And it invites engagement, not resistance.
yeah,
And that's really important. Also, leaders must understand, where were they? Sometimes we're quick to criticize, or we're quick to find fault. But one of the things that keeps me grounded is, even if I want to share, a feedback, I always remember, what was I like 10 years ago? What was I like? Because it's easy to go, you should have done this and you should have done that. And I take a back step, almost in that sense of humility, and go, well, hang on a minute, Joy. When you were at that stage, you weren't doing that. So you take a backstage to bring that empathy into it, to go, well, actually, they've done well. Because when I was there, I was perhaps doing the same thing. But sometimes, because we have grown as leaders, we almost forget that we were once there
yeah.
as well. So that's also, that reminder brings that empathetic approach, to the feedback.
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but it said the only person who has never made a mistake is someone who hasn't tried something new. So
That's right.
clearly, when
That's
people
right.
are trying something new, it might be a newly promoted supervisor or a leader or any new field. Yes, we should be able to have the grace and the humility that we probably started from somewhere. So thanks for sharing that. So as a final area for the people team or the human resources team listening, what is the first thing they can do today to fix the top?
That's a really great question. I would say start with the mirror work. It's an interesting, that mirror work. And that mirror work is about helping to create space for senior leaders to look at themselves. Because back to what we were saying earlier, we can get carried away thinking we know it all, or we don't want to be seen as not having all the answers. So that mirror effect is, create a space for leaders. And this is what we do in coaching, because I have a lot of leadership programs. We have that space for reflection, to look at themselves. That could be a starting point. Which I could also maybe run a leadership culture audit, assessing the culture, within the organization or the culture within their leadership. And this is where coaching becomes a really, really powerful tool, because coaching can kind of help surface some of those blind spots. As well. Many executive teams, they think that they're aligned with purpose, they're aligned with people, but actually their impact tells a different story. It's all about impact. How am I impacting me? How am I impacting and influencing those around me? How often do leaders ask themselves those questions? Because when you think, how am I impacting those, that brings in emotional intelligence. You are aware of how you're rubbing other people. Are you rubbing up the right way or the wrong way? What impact am I having? And HR also, must be brave to speak that truth as well. And guide leaders to who they need to be. And that's really, really important. So when I do a lot of work with leaders, I bring in emotional intelligence. That is to me, it's one of the best things ever. When leaders have that emotional intelligence, now they are ready to align not only with purpose, but they're able to understand that vision and lead with vision, lead with integrity, and be purpose-driven.
Good. Yeah, thanks. So perhaps as a final opportunity, if you have a HR people person culture who is very keen on taking up the opportunity. So for example, if I use my own experience where through the sponsored coaching, the leadership experience where, let's say it was 8 weeks or so. I'm curious to know, what is the typical time frame if HR team would like to book for leadership for teams? What are the typical time frame? Is it 6 weeks, 6 months, 12 months? If you can give some insight as to the coaching and the leadership.
It varies. It varies. We've got 9-week programs, we've got 12-week programs, and this is weekly. And what that does, interesting enough, in terms of having that external, in terms of having a coach, it means that HR don't feel they have to do it all. And sometimes when something is within, some leaders don't either take it seriously because they might just tick the box, or they're afraid to unveil certain things because they think it's going to be held against them, or they're going to appear too vulnerable. But when they come to somebody like me as a coach, we're able to really dig deep, but bring about that reflective purpose, that reflective practices that allows them, and also give them the tools. So they're coming into a space of non-judgment, and they're bringing them their authentic self, because that is where the growth lies, and helping them to harness the growth mindset. So we have programs, and I would say, the 12 weeks program is always a starting point, because it brings them into alignment with helping them create that platform where they can have the space to develop their own leadership style and to understand the leader they are becoming.
Oh, that's huge. Thank you to Joy for your time, for blessing with your time, but incredible insight from mindset to purpose to all the areas that we've looked at. So if listeners want to find more of your work, where can they find you?
So yes, well, there's two ways. You can go to www.joytransformationcoach.com, or you can go to www.jtil.academy. So we've got our academy programs. I talked about vision, integrity, purpose. We've got which is VIP. So we have our VIP leadership approach. That is one of the things that bring in aspiring leaders or leaders who really want to be grounded in their purpose. So that's the program that we run for them. Or if they want to come into the coaching space, then of course, Joy Transformation Coaching helps them in their own personal and professional development. So you can find one, of course, on LinkedIn, Joy Ogie Hartfield, or JT International Leadership Academy. We have a page on LinkedIn as well, where you can sign up to receive our newsletters on leadership matters. And so we can connect.
Okay.
Those spaces.
That's great, Joy. I'll take the links from Joy, and I'll put in the description. So if you are listening or watching this, it should be easier to access if you look to the links. So yeah, thanks once again, Joy.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible, and you are awesome.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the feedback.